Sarah Jenkins walked through the quiet hallways of Atlanta General Hospital, her shoes making soft squeaking sounds against the clean floor. It was another regular night shift in the rehabilitation wing, or at least that's what she thought. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 p.m., and she had just started her rounds, checking on patients who needed help. At 32 years old, Sarah had been working as a nurse for 8 years. She loved her job, even though some people didn't understand why she chose to work the night shift. But for her, these quiet hours were special. She could spend more time with each patient, really listening to their stories and helping them feel better. That night in June changed everything. Sarah was organizing medicines at the nurse's station when she heard the sounds of wheels rolling down the hallway. Looking up, she saw two other nurses bringing in a new patient. The man in the wheelchair caught her attention right away. Despite being in a hospital gown and clearly tired, he had the warmest smile she had ever seen. "Room 304 is ready for Mr. Thompson," one of the nurses said, handing Sarah his file. Sarah looked at the papers. Marcus Thompson, 35 years old, involved in a bad car accident 3 months ago. He had been transferred from another hospital for specialized rehabilitation. What surprised her most was how his medical notes mentioned his exceptionally positive attitude despite his situation. As Sarah walked into room 304 to check on Marcus, she found him trying to arrange his few belongings on the bedside table. Most new patients were usually sad or angry, but Marcus looked up at her with bright eyes and that same warm smile. "Hello there," he said, his voice friendly and clear. "I guess you're going to be taking care of me?" Sarah nodded, surprised by his cheerfulness. "Yes, I'm Sarah Jenkins, your night nurse. How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson?" "Please call me Marcus," he said, attempting to move his wheelchair closer to her. "And I'm feeling blessed, actually. The doctors at my last hospital didn't think I'd make it this far, but here I am, ready to work hard and get better." Something about the way he said those words touched Sarah's heart. In all her years of nursing, she had never met someone who faced such a difficult situation with so much hope. As she checked his vital signs and helped him get comfortable, they talked about simple things: the weather, hospital food, and their favorite TV shows. Over the next few hours, Sarah learned that Marcus used to be a high school teacher before the accident. He taught mathematics and coached the basketball team. The accident had happened when he was driving home from a late-night game. A drunk driver had hit his car, leaving him with serious injuries to his legs and spine. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said while Sarah was helping him with his medicine. "Everyone keeps feeling sorry for me, but I just feel lucky. I'm alive, I can think, I can talk, and I'm getting stronger every day. Plus, I get to meet amazing people like you who help others for a living." Sarah felt her face grow warm at his kind words. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it, with complete honesty and appreciation. Most patients saw the nurses as just hospital staff, but Marcus saw them as real people doing important work. Before her shift ended at 7 a.m., Sarah checked on Marcus one last time. She found him sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed but still holding a hint of that positive expression. Looking at him, Sarah felt something different in her heart, something she hadn't felt before with any patient. As she walked to her car that morning, Sarah thought about Marcus. She had met hundreds of patients over the years, but none quite like him. His strength wasn't just in his determination to get better, but in his ability to stay positive and make others feel special, even when he was the one needing help. Little did Sarah know that this was just the beginning. The quiet night shift that seemed so ordinary would lead to an extraordinary journey of love, courage, and moments that would change both their lives forever. Sometimes the biggest surprises in life come when we least expect them, wrapped in packages we never thought we'd open. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus arrived at Atlanta General Hospital, and Sarah found herself looking forward to her night shifts more than ever before. Even though some of her coworkers noticed she spent extra time in room 304, they didn't say anything. They just smiled knowingly when she walked by. One quiet night, Sarah was helping Marcus with his evening exercises when he asked something unexpected. "Sarah, would you like to have coffee with me in the hospital garden tomorrow morning, after your shift ends?" His voice was steady, but she could see his hands fidgeting with his blanket. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She knew it wasn't exactly proper for nurses to spend time with patients outside of care hours, but something about Marcus made her want to break that rule. "Yes," she answered, surprising herself with how quickly the word came out. I'd like that. The next morning, they sat in the hospital garden, watching the sunrise. Marcus had wheeled himself there, refusing Sarah's offer to help. I need to build my strength, he had said with determination. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their families and dreams. Marcus told her about growing up in Chicago with his 3 sisters, about his love for teaching math, and how his students still sent him get-well cards. Sarah shared stories about her life in Atlanta, her Jamaican parents who worked hard to give her an education, and her journey to becoming a nurse. But not everything was easy. When Sarah told her best friend Lisa about Marcus, the response wasn't what she expected. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked during their lunch meetup. "I mean, he's in a wheelchair, Sarah. Life will be so difficult. And what will your parents say about you dating a white man?" Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "Marcus is more than his wheelchair," she said firmly. "And my parents raised me to judge people by their character, not their color or condition." Meanwhile, Marcus faced his own challenges. His sister Jackie visited him at the hospital and noticed how his face lit up when Sarah entered the room. After Sarah left, Jackie expressed her concerns. "Marcus, honey, are you thinking clearly?" Jackie asked gently. "She's a wonderful nurse, but dating her might be complicated. People will talk, and with your condition." Marcus cut her off. "Jackie, when I was lying in that crashed car, thinking I might die, I promised myself if I survived, I would never let fear stop me from living fully. Sarah makes me feel alive. She sees me, not just my wheelchair." Despite these challenges, Sarah and Marcus grew closer. They started having their coffee meetings every morning after her shifts. The hospital garden became their special place. Other patients and staff would see them there, talking and laughing as the sun came up. One morning, an elderly patient named Mrs. Rodriguez watched them from her window. When Sarah came to check on her later, the old woman took her hand. "I hear ya," she said with a warm smile. "True love doesn't see barriers, it breaks them down. I see how you two look at each other." 3 months into Marcus's stay at the hospital, he had made remarkable progress in his therapy. He could now move his wheelchair without help and was even starting to feel some sensation in his legs. The doctors were impressed, but Sarah knew it wasn't just the physical therapy. It was his determination and positive spirit. Their families slowly came around too. Sarah's mother visited the hospital one day and brought Marcus her famous Jamaican patties. "Anyone who makes my daughter smile like that," she said, "is welcome in our family." Marcus's parents, though initially concerned, saw how happy their son was and began to accept Sarah as part of their lives. One evening, as they sat in their usual spot in the garden, Marcus reached for Sarah's hand. "You know what's funny?" he said, looking into her eyes. "Everyone thinks you're here taking care of me, but really, you're teaching me to live again." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling tears in her eyes. "And you're teaching me that love doesn't care about what people think it should look like." As they sat there, watching another day end and a new one begin, they both knew that what they had found was bigger than any barrier the world could put between them. Their love wasn't about black or white, able-bodied or disabled. It was about 2 hearts that found each other when they weren't even looking. 18 months had passed since that first night in room 304. Marcus had completed his rehabilitation and moved into an apartment near the hospital, but he never forgot where his love story with Sarah began. He had been planning this special moment for months, keeping it a secret from everyone except the hospital staff who had become like family. It was a regular Tuesday night, or at least that's what Sarah thought as she started her shift at Atlanta General Hospital. The rehabilitation wing was unusually quiet, but she didn't think much about it. She was checking her patient lists when her supervisor, Mrs. Thompson, approached her. "Sarah, could you please check room 304? There's a special situation that needs your attention," Mrs. Thompson said, trying to hide her smile. Sarah walked down the familiar hallway, her mind filled with memories of those early days with Marcus. When she opened the door to room 304, she gasped. The room was filled with soft light from dozens of battery-operated candles. Rose petals made a path from the door to the center of the room. There sat Marcus in his wheelchair, wearing a neat suit, looking more handsome than ever. Behind him stood several nurses and doctors who had cared for him during his stay, all holding small signs that together read, "Will you marry me, Sarah Jenkins?" "Marcus," Sarah whispered, her hands covering her mouth in surprise. What is all this? Marcus wheeled himself forward, taking her hand in his. His voice was steady but full of emotion. Sarah, in this very room, you taught me that love sees no barriers. When others saw my wheelchair, you saw my heart. When others heard my story, you heard my dreams. He pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Every day since I met you, I thanked God for that car accident. Yes, you heard me right, he said, noting her surprised expression. Because without it, I might never have met the most beautiful soul I've ever known. Tears were now flowing freely down Sarah's face as Marcus continued. People said our love wouldn't work. They said we were too different, black and white, able-bodied and disabled. But they didn't understand that true love doesn't care about these things. You've shown me that love is about seeing the person inside, about fighting together through hard times, about believing in each other when nobody else does. The hospital staff watched with teary eyes as Marcus opened the ring box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. Sarah Jenkins, will you make me the happiest man in the world? Will you marry me? Sarah could barely speak through her tears. She nodded vigorously before finding her voice. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, she exclaimed. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Nurses who had watched their love story unfold were crying and hugging each other. Dr. Richardson, who had overseen Marcus's rehabilitation, was beaming like a proud father. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the hospital. By morning, local news stations had picked up the story. A black nurse and her white wheelchair-bound patient finding love in a hospital room. It wasn't just a love story, it was a story that challenged people's perspectives about race, disability, and the power of true love. Sarah's parents rushed to the hospital when they heard the news. Her mother hugged Marcus tightly, crying happy tears. You've given our daughter something precious, a love that's pure and true, she said. Marcus's family arrived soon after. His sister Jackie, who had once questioned their relationship, was now the first to congratulate them. I was wrong, she told Sarah. You two were meant to be together. Later that night, after all the excitement had died down, Sarah and Marcus had in their special spot in the hospital garden. The ring sparkled on her finger in the moonlight. You know what makes this perfect? Sarah asked, looking at Marcus with love in her eyes. What's that? He replied, holding her hand. You proposed in room 304, where it all began, where I first saw that smile that changed my life forever. Marcus squeezed her hand. This is just the beginning of our story, Sarah. Just wait until you see what happens at our wedding. Little did Sarah know that Marcus had another surprise planned for their big day, one that would shock not just her, but everyone who knew them. But for now, they sat together in the peaceful garden, two hearts that found each other against all odds, proving that love truly knows no boundaries. Planning a wedding is never easy, but Sarah and Marcus faced unique challenges that most couples never think about. 6 months before their big day, they started visiting wedding venues around Atlanta. What should have been an exciting experience quickly turned frustrating. I'm sorry, said the manager of the 5th venue they visited, a beautiful old church with steep steps leading to its entrance. We don't have wheelchair access, but we could help lift the groom up the stairs. The way she said it made Marcus grip his wheelchair handles tightly. Sarah noticed his knuckles turning white and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. No, thank you, she said firmly. We'll find a place that welcomes both of us properly. That evening, sitting in Marcus's apartment, Sarah found him unusually quiet. What's wrong? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I just wish. Marcus started, then stopped. I wish I could give you the perfect wedding you deserve, not one limited by my wheelchair. Sarah knelt in front of him, taking both his hands in hers. Marcus Thompson, listen to me carefully. Our perfect wedding isn't about fancy buildings or grand staircases. It's about us, about our love story that started in room 304. Her words sparked an idea in Marcus's eyes. What if, he said slowly, what if we have our wedding at the hospital garden, where we had our first coffee date, where we fell in love? Sarah's face lit up. That's perfect. The garden is beautiful, it's accessible, and it means something special to us. The hospital administration was thrilled with the idea. They offered to help organize everything, seeing it as a chance to celebrate a love story that had inspired so many patients and staff members. As the wedding plans progressed, Sarah and Marcus faced another challenge, their guest list. Some relatives from both families declined the invitation, uncomfortable with their interracial marriage. But for every person who chose not to come, it seemed the universe sent two more who supported their love. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly patient who had watched their love story unfold from her hospital window, insisted on helping with the decorations despite being in her 70s. "Love like yours deserves to be celebrated beautifully," she said, teaching the younger volunteers how to make paper flowers for the garden. Marcus spent hours in physical therapy, pushing himself harder than ever. When Sarah asked him why he was working so much on his exercises, he just smiled mysteriously and said, "I want to look my best for our wedding day." One afternoon, while trying on her wedding dress at home, Sarah overheard her mother defending her to a disapproving aunt on the phone. "Love isn't about what people look like or what they can't do," her mother said firmly. "It's about how they make you feel, and Marcus makes my daughter happier than I've ever seen her." The night before the wedding, Sarah was doing her final night shift at the hospital. She had insisted on working, saying it felt right to end this chapter where it began. As she passed room 304, now occupied by a new patient, she stopped to peek inside. An old man was sleeping there, his wife sitting beside him, holding his hand. The woman looked up and smiled at Sarah. "I heard your story," she whispered. "Tomorrow's your wedding, isn't it? My Harold and I have been married 50 years, and I can tell you this: love that faces challenges early becomes the strongest kind of love." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she thanked the woman. Walking through the quiet hallways one last time as a single woman, she remembered all the moments that had led to tomorrow. The first smile, the late-night conversations, the morning coffee dates, the proposal. Every memory was precious. In their separate homes that night, neither Sarah nor Marcus could sleep. She kept looking at her wedding dress hanging on her closet door, while he sat in his wheelchair by the window, watching the stars. Tomorrow would change everything, but neither of them knew just how much. Marcus smiled to himself, thinking about the surprise he had planned. Months of secret therapy sessions, hours of painful exercises, all leading to one magical moment that would leave everyone, especially Sarah, completely speechless. The hospital garden had never looked more beautiful. White chairs lined the pathways between blooming flowers, and an arch covered with roses marked the spot where Sarah and Marcus would say their vows. The morning sun painted everything in a soft, golden light, as if nature itself was blessing this special day. Sarah stood in her old break room, now transformed into a bridal suite. Her white dress flowed perfectly, and her mother was carefully adjusting her veil. "You look like an angel," her mother said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Marcus is a blessed man." Down in room 304, which the hospital had turned into the groom's preparation room, Marcus sat in his wheelchair, looking unusually nervous. His best friend Tom noticed his hands shaking as he adjusted his bow tie. "You okay, man?" Tom asked, concerned. "You look like you're about to jump out of that chair." Marcus laughed softly. "You have no idea," he whispered, checking his legs one last time. The months of secret therapy had prepared him for this moment, but he was still terrified. What if his legs failed him? What if he couldn't do it? At exactly 10 a.m., the music started playing. The garden was filled with 200 guests, hospital staff, family, friends, and even some former patients who had witnessed their love story. Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the front row, beaming with pride as if she were watching her own children get married. Marcus wheeled himself to the front of the arch, his heart pounding. Dr. Richardson, standing nearby, gave him a subtle thumbs up. They had practiced this moment countless times in therapy. When Sarah appeared at the garden entrance with her father, everyone gasped. She was breathtaking in her white dress, but it was her smile that lit up the whole garden. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes never left Marcus. She didn't see a man in a wheelchair. She saw the love of her life, the man who had captured her heart with his smile in room 304. The ceremony began traditionally. The minister spoke about love, commitment, and overcoming obstacles. When it came time for their vows, Sarah went first, her voice strong and clear. "Marcus, you taught me that love sees with the heart, not the eyes. You showed me that strength isn't about what your body can do, but what your spirit can overcome. I promise to be by your side, in weakness and in strength, in joy and in sorrow, for all the days of my life." Then it was Marcus's turn. He took a deep breath and smiled at Sarah. Sarah, you saw me when I was invisible to others. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. And now, I want to show you and everyone here just how far love can take us. What happened next left everyone speechless. Marcus grabbed the arms of his wheelchair firmly. Slowly, with determination in his eyes, he began to push himself up. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in shock. The audience gasped. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Marcus Thompson was standing. With trembling legs but a steady heart, he took one step forward, then another. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she watched her soon-to-be husband walk toward her. The garden was absolutely silent except for the sound of quiet sobs from the guests. I promised myself, Marcus said, now standing directly in front of Sarah, his voice shaking with emotion, that I would stand beside my bride on our wedding day, that I would look into your eyes as your equal, not looking up from a chair. Sarah was crying freely now, her hands trembling as she reached for him. You are always my equal, she whispered. Always. The minister, who had been informed about this surprise, waited for the emotional moment to settle before continuing. But there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even the hospital staff who had helped Marcus prepare for this moment were overwhelmed by seeing it actually happen. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to the person next to her and said softly, "This is what love does. It makes the impossible possible." As Marcus and Sarah held each other, standing together under the rose-covered arch, their love had done more than break down barriers of race and ability. It created a miracle that no one present would ever forget. After the ceremony, as guests gathered in the hospital's transformed cafeteria for the reception, everyone wanted to know the same thing. How had Marcus managed to walk? The story that unfolded was one of determination, secret struggles, and unwavering hope. Marcus sat at the wedding table, holding Sarah's hand, as Dr. Richardson stood up to speak. The room fell silent, eager to hear the explanation behind what they had witnessed. 8 months ago, Dr. Richardson began, Marcus came to my office with what seemed like an impossible dream. He wanted to stand and walk at his wedding. Most doctors would have told him it was too risky, too ambitious, but I had watched his recovery from day one, and I knew if anyone could do it, it would be Marcus Thompson. Sarah turned to her new husband, tears still fresh in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Because I wasn't sure I could do it. I didn't want to give you hope and then disappoint you if I failed." Dr. Richardson continued his story. "We started with 3 therapy sessions a week, early in the morning before anyone would notice. Marcus would come in at 5 a.m. before heading to his teaching job. Every session was a battle against pain, against doubt, against his own body." The doctor pulled out his phone and showed a video on the large screen. It showed Marcus's first attempts to stand, his legs shaking violently, sweat pouring down his face. The next clip showed him falling, again and again, but always getting back up. Sarah watched, her heart breaking and swelling with pride at the same time. There were days, Marcus admitted to the silent room, when I wanted to give up. Days when my legs felt like they were on fire, when every step felt impossible. But then I would think about this moment, about standing beside Sarah, and somehow I found the strength to continue. Tom, Marcus's best friend and physical therapy assistant, stood up next. "I'd never seen anyone work so hard," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Marcus would often stay for extra hours, pushing himself beyond what we thought possible. He fell hundreds of times, but he got up hundreds of times plus one." Sarah's mother was crying openly now, understanding why she had sometimes seen Marcus looking exhausted when he came to visit. All those times he had said he was just tired from work had been cover stories for his grueling therapy sessions. "The hardest part," Marcus continued, looking at his bride, "was keeping it from you, Sarah. Every time you asked why I seemed tired or why I had to rush off early in the morning, I wanted to tell you, but I wanted this moment to be perfect." Dr. Richardson showed more videos. Marcus taking his first unassisted step, Marcus walking the length of the therapy room, Marcus practicing standing still for extended periods. Each video showed progress, but also showed the immense effort and pain behind every achievement. What Marcus did wasn't just about walking, Dr. Richardson explained. It was about proving that with enough love, determination, and support, we can overcome almost any obstacle. However, he added seriously, I want everyone to understand that Marcus will still need his wheelchair most days. What you saw today was the result of months of intensive training for this specific moment. Marcus nodded in agreement. The wheelchair is still part of who I am, he said firmly. I may have stood and walked today, but that doesn't change who I am or what I've been through. If anything, it shows that being in a wheelchair doesn't define my limitations or my possibilities. Sarah stood up then, facing their guests. When I fell in love with Marcus, it wasn't with the idea of him walking or not walking. I fell in love with his spirit, his heart, his smile. What he did today wasn't about proving anything to me, it was about proving something to himself. The room erupted in applause. Mrs. Rodriguez, sitting at a nearby table, raised her glass. To Marcus and Sarah, she called out, "Who proved that love not only breaks barriers, it helps us walk through them." As the celebration continued, Marcus and Sarah shared a private moment. "I have one more surprise," he whispered in her ear. "Would you like to dance with your husband?" Sarah's eyes widened as Marcus slowly stood again, ready to share their first dance, another miracle in a day already filled with them. The video of Marcus standing and walking at his wedding went viral overnight. Someone from the hospital staff had recorded the moment on their phone, and within hours, it was everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. By the next morning, as Marcus and Sarah were preparing to leave for their honeymoon, their phones wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson called a reporter waiting outside their apartment. "Can we get your story for the evening news?" Sarah looked at Marcus, unsure how to handle this sudden attention. They had planned a quiet morning before their flight to Hawaii, but now there were 3 news vans parked outside their building. "Maybe we should talk to them," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Our story might help other couples facing similar challenges." The local news station set up quickly in their living room. The reporter, a kind-faced woman named Jessica Chen, sat across from them. "So tell us," she began, "how did this amazing love story start?" Sarah smiled, remembering that first night in room 304. "I was working the night shift at Atlanta General Hospital when they brought Marcus in," she began. As she told their story, the cameraman zoomed in on their joined hands, Marcus's wheelchair beside the couch where they sat. The interview aired that evening, but it was just the beginning. Major networks picked up the story. Black nurse and white patient find love, break barriers, read one headline. Wheelchair-bound groom surprises bride with first steps, read another. Their story resonated with people around the world. Letters and emails poured in from everywhere: Brazil, Japan, South Africa, Australia. Many were from interracial couples facing family opposition. Others came from people with disabilities who saw hope in Marcus's determination. One morning, Sarah found Marcus crying over an email. "What's wrong?" she asked, worried. "Read this," he said, wiping his eyes. The email was from a 16-year-old boy who had recently been paralyzed in a sports accident. He wrote about wanting to give up until he saw their wedding video. "If you could stand for love," the boy wrote, "maybe I can stand again too." Their story sparked important conversations about accessibility, race, and love. Television shows wanted to interview them. Magazines wanted to feature them. But what touched them most were the personal stories people shared. A young woman wrote about how their story helped her parents accept her relationship with someone from a different race. A man in a wheelchair shared how their wedding video gave him courage to propose to his girlfriend. A nursing student wrote about how their story inspired her to specialize in rehabilitation care. Even those who had doubted their relationship came around. Sarah's aunt, who had refused to attend the wedding, called to apologize after seeing their story on the news. "I was wrong," she admitted. "Love really doesn't see color or condition." Marcus's sister Jackie appeared with them on a morning talk show. "I once questioned their relationship," she said honestly. "But they taught me that love isn't about what you can or can't do. It's about who you are inside." The hospital where their love story began saw changes too. They started a program to make their facilities more accessible. The garden where Marcus and Sarah got married became a popular spot for other couples facing similar situations. Dr. Richardson used their story in his presentations at medical conferences, showing how determination and emotional support could enhance physical recovery. The Thompson case, as it became known in medical circles, inspired new research into rehabilitation therapy. One evening, as they watched another news segment about their story, Sarah noticed Marcus looking thoughtful. "What's on your mind?" she asked. All these people reaching out to us, he said slowly. Maybe this is our purpose, to show others that love can overcome any obstacle. Sarah nodded, understanding what he meant. Their private love story had become a public symbol of hope. While they hadn't asked for this attention, they accepted it as a responsibility to help others believe in the power of love. We're just an ordinary couple who refuse to let others define our love, Marcus told a reporter in their last interview before their honeymoon. If our story helps even one person believe in themselves or their love, then all this attention is worth it. Sarah squeezed his hand as cameras flashed around them. They were no longer just Marcus and Sarah Thompson. They had become symbols of hope, courage, and the transformative power of love. 5 years had passed since that magical wedding day in the hospital garden. Marcus and Sarah Thompson sat in their foundation's new office, surrounded by photos of couples they had helped over the years. The largest photo showed them standing together at their wedding, a moment that had changed not just their lives, but countless others. The Thompson Foundation for Inclusive Love read the sign on their door. What had started as a small support group in their living room had grown into a national organization helping couples facing similar challenges to the ones they had overcome. Remember our first meeting? Sarah asked, looking at a photo of their initial support group. Just 6 couples in our apartment, all scared about what the future held for them. Marcus smiled, wheeling himself to her side. Though he could walk short distances on special occasions, he primarily used his wheelchair, something he had learned to embrace as part of his identity. Now look at us, he said proudly. 300 couples helped last year alone. The foundation did more than just offer emotional support. They worked with hospitals to improve accessibility, provided grants for couples needing medical equipment, and fought against discrimination in all its forms. They had even started a scholarship program for nursing students interested in rehabilitation care. That morning, they had a special visitor. James Chen, the teenage boy who had emailed them 5 years ago after their wedding, walked into their office. Yes, walked. I did it, he said, tears in his eyes as he hugged them both. Just like you said I could, Mr. Thompson. It took 5 years, but I did it. Sarah watched as Marcus talked with James, sharing their experiences with physical therapy and the mental challenges of recovery. This was why they had chosen to make their story public, for moments like these. Their own life had found a beautiful rhythm. Sarah still worked part-time at the hospital, now running a program helping patients and caregivers navigate relationships during recovery. Marcus had returned to teaching math, his students inspired by his story of perseverance. They had welcomed their first child 2 years ago, a daughter named Hope. She was the perfect mix of both her parents, with Sarah's warm brown skin and Marcus's bright blue eyes. When people asked about her unique appearance, Hope would proudly say, "I'm the color of love." The Thompson Foundation had become known for its annual Love Without Limits conference, where couples from around the world gathered to share their stories and support each other. This year's conference was special. They were celebrating their 1,000th success story. Marcus, Sarah, called their assistant from the door. The news crew is here for the anniversary interview. As they prepared for the interview, Sarah noticed Marcus looking at their wedding photo again. Thinking about something? She asked. Just amazed at how far we've come, he replied. Remember when people said we wouldn't last? Now we're helping others believe in their love stories. The reporter sat up in their office, surrounded by the evidence of their work. Letters from grateful couples, photos of successful weddings, news clippings about policy changes they had helped implement. 5 years ago, your wedding video went viral, the reporter began. Did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? Sarah looked at Marcus before answering. Our love story was just the beginning, she said. What matters is all the love stories that came after, the couples who found courage in our experience, the families who learned to accept love in all its forms. Marcus added, we're not special. We just refuse to let others define our love. Now we help other couples do the same. Later that evening, they held their monthly support group meeting. New couples sat alongside those who had been with them for years. As they listened to each story, a woman in a wheelchair engaged to her college sweetheart, an interracial couple fighting for acceptance, a deaf man and his hearing partner planning their wedding. Sarah and Marcus knew they had found their true purpose. Every love story is worth fighting for, Marcus told the group. Sarah and I just happened to fight ours in public. As they wrapped up the meeting, A young couple stayed behind. The woman was in a wheelchair, her partner standing beside her, both looking nervous but hopeful. "We saw your wedding video," a woman said softly. "It gave us hope. Can you tell us how your story began?" Sarah and Marcus looked at each other, smiling. "Well," Marcus began, "it all started in room 304. Their story had come full circle, but their legacy was just beginning. Through their foundation, their love continued to break down barriers, change lives, and prove that true love knows no limitations."